This is UMAR AHMED for IFL TV in association with MTK Global. So going to do something slightly different. I'm just going to name you a list of fights that have been announced for this year and some potential fights that are likely to take place, Ben, and I just want you to break them down. So we'll start with Alexander Usyk v Joe Joyce.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I do think there's still some questions over Usyk at heavyweight, for me anyway. I was really impressed with Joe last time out, and it was something I mentioned, might have been with you actually after the fight, about his very uncoordinated, unorthodox rhythm that he makes work for him. And I think the problem was with Daniel, like Daniel was waiting on Joe's and working on Joe's timing, which, for the reasons I just said there, makes it very hard to get in sync with him and be able to read his timing. I think with Usyk, he'll probably try and be the one to set a higher tempo, so that he's not playing to Joe's rhythm to a certain degree, if you know what I mean. And then whether Joe's size will come into play in the fight, I'd imagine that Joe would try to do so, but whether he's able to do so, be an interesting one. I certainly think it'll be a different fight to the WSB fight that we see that's on YouTube at the minute though. But it's a good fight, and I think I was really impressed with Joe, especially his long distance boxing which he showed against Daniel. So it's a really interesting fight, and as I say, there are questions over Usyk at heavyweight, so that'll be an interesting one, a good clash of styles.
Give you another heavyweight one, Alexander POVETKIN v Dillian Whyte, the rematch.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, the problem was Dillian was having success. Dillian was having success in the fight. Obviously dropped him twice, and I understand he was thinking, look, I'm having success, I'm putting on a good performance, I don't want to rush in and take any silly chances, and ended up getting clipped with one. I actually heard Dave Caldwell, and he was 100% right. Don't keep giving him the left hook to the body. What I'm sure what Dave meant was, don't keep giving the left hook to the body, because staying there catching it, because eventually from that same position where he's dropping down for the left hook to the body, he can do exactly that. Bring the left uppercut up, bring the left hook upstairs off, and he can build some variety off of that. So, I'm sure they would look to that and worked on that. And a couple of the things that Dillian does is, when he tucks up in his shell, he takes his head straight down sometimes, as opposed to taking his head and turning his shoulders to the left or to the right, so his head's not central and on the line. And then sometimes he takes his head outside of his base, so when he's slipping, his head's going so far away from his base that he can't see what's happening in front of him. But I said before, I was really impressed with the way that he handled defeat, went away straight back to work and working on things and taking the fight straight away again. So I was really impressed with that. I'm sure he would have made some nice improvements, and you always got to be careful with POVETKIN overcommitting and him drawing one out here off the jab slip, or letting you throw your jab to slip and time you onto one. So you got to be varied with your punches, vary your distance up and be smart. But like I say, they've shared the ring, and I'm sure Dillian will be a little bit cute and a little bit smarter this time.
Let's move down to the 160 weight class, Demetrius Andrade v Liam Williams.
It's an interesting one. I know Liam Williams has looked really, really good at middleweight so far, and he has looked really good. The only thing for me is he hasn't boxed somebody of a Liam Smith yet at middleweight for us to gauge it properly. But with that said, neither's Andrade, and Andrade's not. It's hard to gauge Andrade. I know there's a lot of hype about him in America, and I know that he's a top quality boxer and a tough night's work for anybody. But I just see a lot of fundamental flaws that he makes. Not going to go into them too much, because it could potentially be a fight for Billy Joe, obviously. And although I'm not training Billy Joe, he's a friend of mine, and so I'm not going to go into too many details of that. But it's an interesting fight, and I think that Liam's got momentum behind him, which is brilliant. And I think potentially the lack of quality of opponents for Andrade going into the fight could make it a bit more of a sticky one. But fundamental flaws there for Andrade, a lot of fundamental flaws that he makes, and it's hard to gauge because, like I say, the two opponents, we know Liam Williams boxed Liam Smith. We know that he was in the fights. It's not like he wasn't in the fights. But to see him do that at middleweight yet, I think it's a jump up in class. But like I say, Andrade's not been boxing at top level, so it's hard to gauge the pair of them. I just think if you walk straight out Andrade, he's going to have a field day. So it'd be interesting to see what Liam Williams brings to the table.
Let's move off the division. Canelo Alvarez v Billy Joe Saunders.
Obviously, I'm not going to go into details of what Billy Joe would need to do for the reason I just previously explained. But like, if you watch Canelo versus Liam Smith beefy, then it's a completely different Canelo that boxed Callum. He's changed his style a lot, grown, developed, and even from the Mayweather fight, I know people will say that that's the blueprint, and there's elements of what Mayweather did, obviously, that work against any fighter. It's principle. It's just how you use that principle.
Go on, yeah. Go on, take the mic.
Are you going to close that window?
What?
Are you closing the window?
No, I'm just take the mic.
So I think that what Canelo will try to do will try to press Billy Joe, make Billy Joe work at a higher pace, thinking Billy Joe's going to throw a lot of shots to try and keep him off him. Canelo let him hit some gloves, hit some forearms, hit some gloves, hit some forearms, slip, counter. Although Canelo will be on the front foot, he'll try to draw Billy Joe onto something while being an aggressive counter puncher. But he's very, very smart. Obviously, there's a lot more to Canelo's game than that, but I think that that'll be the sort of fundamental areas that Canelo will try to look to do, and try to make Billy Joe work at a higher pace than what he'll need to do. But like I said, I'm not going to go into what I think Billy Joe would need to do in that fight, as I said.
Now, I know you've talked this one to death, but obviously it is probably the biggest fight we've seen for a long, long time. So I will ask you in this breakdown of 2021, Tyson Fury v Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, I've done this one just a few times in that, but look, the thing is, as I've said before, they've both shown a lot of versatility. I'm going to say in recent times, but Tyson, like, if you went back to Tyson's first fight as a pro, then looked 17, 18 fights in, completely different. Come to now, completely different again. So throughout his career, you can see progress and development and adjustments and changes of style. Big changes of styles, really, to be honest with you. And I think it's a strength that he's worked with a lot of different coaches, a lot of different philosophies, trained in lots of different ways. Every coach has strengths and weaknesses and philosophies, and he's extremely versatile. But he's able to make those adjustments in there. He's able to make those adjustments in there like that, second nature, because he's been doing these different things for such a long period of time. With Joshua, people used to think that I was always being critical. I wasn't being critical. I just always felt that before he was probably a level below because he was one-dimensional, quite predictable. And what happened with Ramirez, I just felt was always probably going to happen because of that. But now he's starting to show a bit of versatility. He's adapting, showing other areas to his game. The problem is for him, I don't think he's as comfortable being versatile as Tyson. But he's shown improvements. I can tell that he's studying his opponents, and the interesting part for me is the first round. The first round, maybe 2 rounds. Who comes out? Who's the aggressor? Who goes on the back foot? How do both fighters approach the fight? And I think that's an interesting one because Josh, we've seen, been showing a bit of mobility and boxing on the back foot and he actually drew Pulev onto a brilliant shot, touched him, slipped, boom. And we know Tyson's a masterful back foot boxer. But we've also seen Joshua on the front foot, we've seen Tyson on the front foot. I just think that Tyson's more comfortable being versatile with quite a few more layers than I think Joshua has.
Errol Spence v Terence Crawford.
Interesting one. Errol Spence, southpaw. When was the last time Crawford boxed a southpaw? Jojo Diaz, I think. Don't quote me. And recently we've often seen Crawford switch to southpaw to make his opponents fall short, to then draw them onto the counter. It'd be interesting to see if he switched southpaw with Errol Spence. I think that if he did, Errol Spence would find it easier to get closer because there wouldn't be the clash of the lead hands. He'd be able to establish his jab a lot easier, Spence that'd be. So it'd be interesting to see if Crawford took that fight as an orthodox to create a distance between the two of them. But it'd be interesting to see the pair of them, not on weight, but around their weight, to see the size difference. I know there's an interview of them both together, but I've not seen the pair of them and the physical stature of them stood next to each other. Because we know Terence Crawford can fight, but Errol Spence looks like a beast physically at welterweight. So it's definitely an interesting one, and I think that's a fight where both guys will have success implementing their game plans throughout that fight.
Last but not least, Josh Taylor v Jose Ramirez.
Obviously, I'm not going to go into details, but one thing I will say, and I've said this to Josh, that Jose Ramirez is a God-fearing man, and he's got that will to win. With those things alone, toughness and Mexican blood, it's never going to be an easy fight. It's always going to be a hard fight, no matter what. And that's certainly the case. Like I say, I'm not going to go into too many details because the fight that's coming up for one of my fighters, but either way, with those things that he's got there, taking away the fact that he's a world championship boxer, with those elements that he's got there, and someone's coming with that pride and that fighting spirit, it's going to be a tough night.